what is art under capitalism? Is it revolutionary? Is it propaganda? Beyonce. What are the historical contexts behind these bodies of work? What does it mean for an artist to make things for the culture? And how is that received by people of said culture?
Hi guys, what's up? It's Tahiry. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello. Don't forget to click the subscribe button down below and join the fam. I make a lot of fun videos, including this video, Ignore the Glare in My Glasses. We're not gonna talk about it. I feel like 2024, even though it was like a wild year in general, was really one for the culture, specifically the last 6 months. And we're gonna include January and February of 2025 in that as well, because we must. If we're talking about award shows, if we're talking about albums, there's just an air of, como se dice, reclamation amongst Black and Brown communities. And so I really wanted to talk about a few projects in particular: Cowboy Carter by Beyonce, as well as Beyonce Bowl, as well as Beyonce's win at the Grammys. I also wanted to talk about Kendrick Lamar and They Not Like Us, as well as his Super Bowl performance and his win at the Grammys. I wanted to talk about Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos by Bunny. I think since the album came out, it has been on the top 10 of Billboard's, at least top 50. And talk more about like Puerto Rico, his residency, and you know, I'm a little nerdy, so we gotta throw in all of the controversy and conversation that have been going around about Children of Blood and Bone, the super mega success YA fantasy novel that got adapted into a movie, and the cast just got announced. But the theme I really wanted to discover is how there's a shift in our art that is now reflecting the reality of our time. It feels like now art is reflecting life again, but specifically, what does it look like under capitalism? There has been a lot of conversations, and always been a lot of conversations, about people from marginalized groups getting to certain levels of success and their decision to either pay homage to their communities and their culture, or to overlook it in certain ways. And so I wanted to kind of like unpack that. What is art under capitalism? Is it revolutionary? Is it propaganda? Beyonce. What are the historical contexts behind these bodies of work? What does it mean for an artist to make things for the culture? And how is that received by people of said culture? Let's start with Cowboy Carter. If you guys don't know, which is impossible at this point to not know, but Beyonce came out with Cowboy Carter around a year and a half ago. Cowboy Carter is a part of a series of albums and projects that she is coming out with that she made during the pandemic, or at least was inspired by during the pandemic. And the series, to me at least, seems to just be like a reclamation of genres of music that have traditionally Black origins. So Renaissance was the first one, and that was about reclaiming house music, which is Black. Cowboy Carter was, like the name insinuates, about reclaiming country music, which is Black. And the suspicions for the third album are going to be a rock album, which is, you guessed it, Black. Black as hell. Yes, ma'am. There has been a lot of conversation about Beyonce. There's always a lot of conversation about Beyonce, let's be for real. Specifically about this album from multiple viewpoints. Recently, she did Beyonce Bowl, which on Christmas, which was like her performing at a football game. It wasn't the Super Bowl. That performance sparked conversations on TikTok about this album and about Black patriotism and propaganda is the buzzword, right? And then going into her wins at the Grammy. When I first heard Cowboy Carter, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't pay it too much mind. There were some songs that were bops from jump, such as Levi Jeans, Sweet Honey Buckin', Sweet Country Bumpkin, girl, that song with Shabuzi. Shout out to Shabuzi. 16 Carriages, and then her song with Miley Cyrus, Ya Tyrant. Like, there were some bops, but I didn't really like deep it the way that I would say like other Beyonce fans did. I also did really like Renaissance, but I'm not a country girl, to be honest. Not only am I not a country girl, like literally, but I'm also not into country music like that. I'm from South Jamaica, Queens. I'm from New York. I'm a Northeast girl through and through. But like most Black people in the Northeast, you know, my family got here via the Great Migration. So we obviously do have roots in the South. And so when Beyonce Bowl came out, it allowed me to see the album from a different perspective. I am not someone that ever really was attached to the idea of Black nationalism or like Black patriotism. But some of those thoughts of and opinions that I had has changed recently because of just like more research, more exposure. For those who don't know, I am back in school and I'm majoring in Africana Studies with a focus on the Caribbean and a minor in journalism, period. And so at the end of my last semester in fall, the Africana Studies department took a field trip to the Black Smithsonian, the African American Museum. I don't know which one is the appropriate name for it, but it's in DC and the building is built like a slave ship. And I'm not saying that to be annoying. It is built like a slave ship, like intentionally. And it was going there that made me really start to understand the idea of Black patriotism. I've always been someone that like have struggled with the idea of like reclaiming America, because like when I talk about Blackness, I'm African American and Afro-Caribbean. When I talk about my American experience, it's always through a Black lens, but I've always separated it from who America has been as a country and as a colonizing imperialist nation, right? It wasn't until I got to that museum and I'm really looking at the life of Black people in this country. And like one of the classes I'm taking this semester is African American History to Reconstruction. And the way that the African American ethnicity and culture was built, like to be honest, the only great thing about America is Black people, has been Black people. That plus me starting to travel and being called American for the first time in my life. Like obviously African American is like the term of our ethnicity, but to be honest, I've always just used the term African American and Black interchangeably. I've never called myself American. I've never been considered American until I left America, right? Because when you're Black in America, that American title, why did I say America? How many times did I say America? But yeah, but like the American identity was never something that I claimed. And so then I started traveling and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you're American. And so I had to kind of figure out my own feelings. I'm still trying to figure out my own feelings about that because I do have a lot of pride in my Blackness and in my ethnicity and in my history as an African American person. So watching Beyonce Bowl and really listening to the lyrics, I was like, oh, this is not the album I thought it was. I think it's easy for people to hear Black patriotism, Black nationalism, and connect it to like ADOS people. There's some other groups I don't really feel like mentioning. Pro-Black groups in the US that feel very tied to America in a way that gets a little weird, in my opinion, or in a way that I can at least say like dismisses America's history, right? Like they attach themselves to America in a similar way that white people do. And that is always going to be concerning. That's what I thought Cowboy Carter kind of was. Like even just the cover photo of her like on this horse with this American flag sparked a lot of controversy. Also, if it wasn't obvious, I'm Muslim. Hello. So I remember that like when this album came out, it was also like during the height of what's been going on with Palestine in the country that don't exist. I'm obviously on Muslim side of the internet and I'm also on Black side of the internet. And like that was a really conflicting and confusing time for me that I didn't really talk about publicly because I didn't want to curse nobody out. But there were a lot of Muslims and other people who are obviously coming from countries that were victims of American brutality, American imperialism, you know, people from Iran, people from Iraq, etc. And I completely understand their perception of America is not necessarily encompassing the nuances of Blackness and American history and like Black American history. When your people have been bombed or have been invaded by a certain country, really all you see, like you're not looking at the difference between a white soldier and a Black soldier. You see a soldier with American flag on their uniform. So I understood that, right? But like I mentioned before, as somebody that has traveled a lot, like I've spent summers in different countries, y'all already know that, it does get a little bit frustrating as a Black person who is, once again, never treated or gotten the American experience in America because of my Blackness. But then I go overseas and it's like all people see is my Americanness. I do also think that sometimes the nuances and the history of what it means to be Black in America gets lost when you're overseas and from people that are from overseas, because all they see is like America, American media. That's a video for another day. But I just remember like seeing all of this conflict and all of this discourse about it. Even people that I greatly respected were talking about the use of this American flag, right? And how it just felt like tone deaf. And it's like, you know, Beyonce's a billionaire, right? You can't really be a good person to be a billionaire. But I'm listening to the lyrics again, and there's a line in Yaya where she says, there's a whole lot of red in that black and blue. This is Beyonce reclaiming not just country music as like an abstract, but like claiming her roots as a Southern girl. See, Beyonce is Creole. Beyonce is Black. Beyonce is from Houston. Beyonce is like a Black country Southern girl. Going into the conversation about this being propaganda on TikTok was just very confusing for me, because I think we're having different understandings of what the propaganda was. The girl who made that video, she knew when she was using the word propaganda, she wasn't meaning it as anything other than a pejorative. She was not saying propaganda in any neutral or even positive way. But I'm just confused because I'm like, this is probably the most Beyonce we've ever seen. Like, this is the most of her that I feel like she's ever given us of herself, because this is literally her roots. This is where she's from. And if it wasn't for the inclusion of Black country artists, and unfortunately, you know, she had a few white people. If it wasn't for the intentionality of how she constructs her music, how she constructed this album, including other Black country singers, you know, the samples, paying homage, all of that. If this was really about her just talking about like good old America, then yeah, I think we are in agreement about what that propaganda is. But when I listen to the album and I look at the Beyonce Bowl, I'm like, this is not, I don't think we're listening to the same album that like Beyonce actually created. I think we're coming at it from a perspective of, this is a billionaire and this is someone who definitely has utilized revolutionary Black images as a means of gaining capital, 1,000%. But the most consistent that Beyonce has ever been, in my opinion, is her era of Blackness. And what I mean by that is, like, from Lemonade on, the running theme has been, if not pro-Black, just unapologetically Black. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out what the propagandizing is, because is it a bad thing if she's just repping her roots and her reality? Is it a bad thing for her to rep Black patriotism if it's also aware of and critiquing low-key, high-key of America as a whole? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think she did what she was supposed to do with this album. I think it would have been tone deaf if she just made a country album and wasn't talking about what it means to be American in this country, or like what it means to be in the genre of country music as a Black woman. Like, and knowing that this album stemmed from the Country Music Awards, like dubbing her, I just question, I'm like, are we listening to the same album, or did we see an American flag and we saw a billionaire and we saw a horse and we heard a banjo and we said, she's trying to get us to start cooning? And like, I don't know. I just don't think Beyonce was tap dancing in this album. That's really my argument. I think Beyonce Bowl and Cowboy Carter is a similar vibe to like how Black people talk about the Olympics. And funny enough, Beyonce like did that video, like that opening, whatever, for the Olympics, also using Yaya. Am I crazy? Right. The Olympics is the only time that like Black people have any type of like patriotic pride, like at all. And it's because, like I said before, the greatest thing about America is Black people. America's biggest export is Black excellence. Like, we dominate every art, science field, sports, entertainment, whatever. Like, it's us. And so I think it's similar in that vein of like, are we, when we're watching the Olympics and we rooting for all the Black girls, the Black people repping the USA team, are we, when we're saying USA, you think us and the Trump supporters are saying USA for the same no, like, do you see what I mean? Now when I'm listening to Cowboy Carter, and I was literally just listening to it before I started filming, and now when I'm like looking at like the iconography of her country moments, I just see it in a different light. I think she's talking about a very specific Black experience growing up as a Southern girl. And I do think also like Black people from other parts of the country, whether it's like you're from the West Coast, you're from the Midwest, like Chicago, or you're from the East Coast, we have to be mindful about critiquing and judging other people's Black experiences, because they are vastly different from ours. I don't know what it's like to be Black in the South. I don't know what it's like to be Black on the West Coast. And like, y'all don't know what it's like, unless you're from here, to be Black on the East Coast, to be, do you know what I mean? And so I just think there wasn't a lot of understanding and sensitivity around what she was doing with this album, because it's Beyonce doing it. And then so going into like her Grammy win really quick, if I'm wrong, am I wrong? She won the Grammy with Miley Cyrus for best country duo, best duo. Then she won a Grammy for, is it album of the year or best country album? Future Tahiry is going to put it on the screen. But one of the two, if not both. And that was a really beautiful moment. I will say though, do I think Cowboy Carter, me personally, Tahiry, do I think Cowboy Carter deserved to win album of the year this year? No. Do I think Beyonce deserves to win artist of the year, album of the year, like she been deserved that? Yes. And so I think it was really like a critique on last year's Grammys and how people just stopped watching the Grammys. And like apparently the Grammy host came on the stage and made a whole announcement about like their judging category, and they added more judges. And remember Jay-Z got up on the stage and basically was like, y'all playing in my wife's face. They was giving it to her because they knew they was playing with her before. I'm not gonna say who I think should have won album of the year. I don't have an answer for you. I think Cowboy Carter did exactly what it's supposed to do. I might go see a concert if the tickets go down. I'll buy a resold ticket 2 days before the show. And if I can't get it in, I'm not going. I don't have no more thoughts either on the girl that was talking about propagandizing and that she got a front row ticket, girl. And I want to add that like I'm not a huge beehiver. I just like music. I'm a lover of art. Shout out to Irby. I keep saying Irby because yo hablo español. Y obviamente en español no digo H, right? You don't say H. Shout out to Herbie Rivales, who always says, I like smart art. I feel the same way. And so that's just my lens for looking at Cowboy Carter. I don't think that she was perpetuating a version of America the same way that like white people do, or like Proud Boys or any of that. And I don't think that she was also giving like weird foundational Black Americans and like American ADOS people type of Black nationalism. I think she was really just talking to a very specific type of Black American experience and expressing her pride for that. I think for me also the reason why I didn't necessarily claim America and didn't have to face that title is because I'm from the North and I'm from the East Coast. That's not something that we have up here. Like you rep your borough. You know what I mean? Like I rep Queens, but in the South, everywhere is American flag this. Like there's just so much history there. So comment down below your thoughts on the album and your favorite song. And if your favorite song is not Levi Jeans, I don't know what to tell you. Speaking of propaganda, let's talk about K-Dot, Mr. Lamar, as Samuel Jackson kept calling him in the Super Bowl. Similar to Beyonce Bowl and Cowboy Carter, Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance sparked a lot of conversations, a lot of discourse, a lot of yapping, specifically on the Clock app, about the hidden messages and iconography and the symbolism of Kendrick's performance. And in my opinion, I do feel like what Kendrick was doing and what Beyonce was doing was very, very different. The Super Bowl performance felt less personal than Cowboy Carter. There was really only like one moment that I felt like, oh, this is Kendrick talking about his Black experience. And it was that moment where they were on the corner and there was like a lamppost, right? And then like Mandem was like, they was all with their white t-shirts and their grills. And like even the fact that these were all like Black men and like the makeup of like the American flag, like Crips and Bloods, like that felt very like, this is my Black American experience as a Black man from the West Coast. But that was not the crux of the performance, in my opinion. Kendrick's performance was a direct critique of America. You know how in Kendrick Lamar's performance of the Super Bowl, he starts it and it looks like a video game thing, like the different boxes? Something about Kendrick's performance at the Super Bowl gave that he was like talking about America from the outside perspective. Like he was kind of like looking down, not looking down on us, but more so like he is at a further place in his wokeness, for lack of a better term. And he's kind of like trying to paint this picture for the rest of us to wake it up, guiding us, leading us. Kendrick kind of takes on a lot of that like Black prophet like label. If you listen to the song Reincarnated on his album GNX, you know what I'm talking about. And something about Beyonce's performance felt like she was in it. Like she's talking about her Black experience and it going outward. And I don't know if that makes sense, but like energetically, that's what I was getting from it. I feel like Kendrick was a bit removed and he's painting a picture and he's illustrating a point and he's trying to lead us to the promised land. But before the Super Bowl performance, just talking about They're Not Like Us and the whole Kendrick and Drake beef, I was concerned about what he was going to do with this show. The NFL is a organization that is deeply anti-Black and problematic. Poor Colin Kaepernick to go through all that he went through and to see people low-key kind of like cooning. I don't think Kendrick is cooning. I think Jay-Z was definitely cooning. I think Kendrick is kind of like, I have the spotlight, I have this attention, I have this platform, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to spread the message in the way that I can. And it has to be subtle and it has to be hidden and it has to be like symbolic, because if I make it literal, they're going to take the platform away. They never going to let no nigga like me get back on here. And so I felt like it was like breadcrumbs. But I was wondering what he was going to do with that, because I think the Drake and Kendrick beef was really bigger than Drake and Kendrick. Y'all have probably heard many people talk about this before, including FD, who y'all know I love FD. It was about like the heart and soul of hip hop. It was about like reclaiming hip hop from the media and like the corporations and like all of these teenage white boys that don't know nothing about nothing, which is crazy that like white people are the biggest consumers of hip hop and don't know nothing about nothing these rappers be talking about, right? But also saving hip hop and saving the culture from this like dumbing down of the art form. Like I was saying in the beginning, it feels like there's a resurgence of our music and our art being about something, talking about something, which hip hop specifically has always been an art form rooted in rebellion, rooted in revolution. And so whether or not you think Kendrick is a revolutionary or his performance was an act of revolution, I don't think it matters. Like I remember watching his performance and thinking about that quote that's like, I may not change the world, or like you may not change the world, but you may like write something or create something that sparks the mind of the person who will change the world. And I feel like that is what Kendrick's work is about, passing the torch. Like Kendrick gives uncle vibes. Like Kendrick gives something about this feels very like elderly. When I mean elderly, I don't mean old. I mean like he's an uncle. He's like somebody of a place of authority. In hip hop terms, he is a gatekeeper, right? And I think that that is also what this beef with Drake was about. And FD's video goes into a lot more detail about how like that is really what changed and what made Drake come into fruition. Is we kind of lost the gatekeepers because the people that should be gatekeepers, our elders and our unks, Snoop Dogg, Nelly, who else was tap dancing from Massa? All of these people sold off hip hop for $1 and let a whole bunch of people into the industry and into the game that really did not deserve to be there. And that's how we got Aubrey. Okay. What was his name? Jimmy. That's how we got Jimmy in a wheelchair as like the top of hip hop. And so I think Kendrick came to purify the art form. This is, should I even say this? Somebody's gonna take this out of context. This is belief in Islam that like every few centuries, every few generations, there's going to be somebody to come and kind of like purify the faith again. Not necessarily a prophet, because we have our last prophet, but to just kind of remind us of his last message. And different people have different beliefs about who in each generation that person was. I think that that is what Kendrick is doing with hip hop. Not necessarily like taking the mantle for himself, but I think he's trying to lead us somewhere. The revolution will be televised, but then he ends the performance with turn the TV off. He's trying to take us somewhere. Do you get me? And I feel like specifically since the pandemic, and maybe in the last like 8 to 10 years, there's been like this rise of like mumble rap, which I won't discredit mumble rap. Is they be bangers, right? But the idea is like the art form of hip hop has greatly been washed down, and specifically when it comes to men, they don't have to be talented. There's a few girls, Ice Spice and Sexy Red, who kind of slid in as well via like TikTok. Hip hop has kind of been dying. Other than the girls, shout out to Dochiana, Dochi the Don, Dochi the Dean, Dochi Supreme, the Swamp Ruler. Are you stupid? Dochiana won the Grammy? Oh, Dochiana, yeah. I should do a whole video on Dochi. Why? I don't know. But I'm gonna find a way that makes sense to do a video on Dochi because I love her. The girls have been eating hip hop up, and hip hop is still a male dominated game, a male dominated industry. They have been slacking, and it feels like if y'all watch the movie They Clone Tyrone on Netflix, you know exactly what I mean. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. But it's this idea of like using black things, black art forms, black food, like whatever, to like lull us into a state of ignorance and passivity and delusion and keep us distracted so that we're not really tapped in to what we should be tapping into, which is like they're literally taking our rights from us. That is what hip hop has felt like recently. Just a whole lot of nonsense and not a whole lot of talent. Okay. And so I think with the emergence of people like Doechii and Kendrick coming back with the beef with Drake and coming back with GNX, it feels like a reclamation of the art form of like, nah, take it out the hands of the organizations. Like, this is not about capital, it's about culture. Kendrick represents the culture. Kendrick is the spokesperson of hip hop, and he embodies it and the roots and the art form of hip hop and blackness in a way that like Drake could never do. And a lot of our current artists do not have the capacity to hold or to maneuver in the same manner. Does every piece of art that we watch or enjoy have to be deep? No, but I do think it's irresponsible for Black people to think that you can exist in a world where you do not have to take whatever success platform that you have and use it for the betterment of our people. Me personally, I think it's irresponsible and it's ignorant for you to not want to do something for the people in some type of capacity. It's like these YNs, okay, are just trying to make some money. Like, it just felt like nonsense. And the people that are really rapping about something, talking about something, don't have the success that they deserve. And also our greats, if we're talking about how this whole beef started with J. Cole being like, he was talking about who the top 3 in hip hop is. Kendrick and J. Cole have been MIA, okay? When we needed the most, he was gone. Okay, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Do you understand? Like, they were doing their own thing with their families, which is fine. That is how hip hop kind of got to where it is. And so I think, like I said, Kendrick is like taking the torch and kind of like, you know, turning on the light, and like all the like cucarachas are gonna like run away. I think he's trying to like cleanse hip hop. I think he's trying to cleanse the culture in a certain type of way. And I think one of the biggest things that like made Kendrick win the beef with Drake is obviously They Not Like Us, and how this is like a club banger talking about something, you know, you hear the song and you want to crip up, right? Like, and they was really playing it. Like, I'm from New York, they was playing it at Everyday People, and they playing it at the block parties and on Tompkins and all of that. But you hear the lyrics and you're like, oh, once upon a time, all of us was enslaved. We're talking about gentrification. We're talking about the selling out of the culture when he was like going to Atlanta and buying your blackness. Yeah. You're not a colleague, you a colonizer. Like, he was talking about something and you still wanna. There's an art to it that Black people have always been able to do in hip hop, and that has been lost. And honestly, not even just the song itself, but like, I saw some people on TikTok talking about Kendrick don't do nothing for the community. That's kind of crazy. You could talk about the TDE Christmas concert benefit where like the kids was there and he was raising all this money to get gifts and stuff for the kids. He's very active in LA and Compton and his communities. Even the Super Bowl, like the people, you could tell these wasn't actors. Obviously they had dancers up there, but like he was very intentional about using his space and his 14 minutes to say something and do something. Okay, having Serena up there. I recognize some of the dancers as well from TikTok. The features on GNX, which are largely smaller West Coast artists that he had on GNX. The only like notable features was like Roddy Ricch is on one of the songs, and then SZA. And then you had the Cash App commercial that he did, and like how they were selling tickets for his show, which that inshallah I am going to go see. The pre-sale was via Cash App. Why? Because niggas got Cash App cards. And then even that commercial was genius because he's literally talking about code switching. I remember seeing that commercial on YouTube, which by the way, I also did like a little commercial with Cash App. It's on their YouTube channel if y'all want to go look at it. I'll link it down below. It's like Kendrick explaining something that one of the homies is saying to the white guy who represents like, I guess like Cash App and business or whatever. And he's explaining what the white guy said to one of the homies. And like, that is so Black. Like, he understands, he is the culture. Do you know what I mean? And like, Drake is barely talking about Black struggles. When I found out that Drake was African American via his daddy, his ancestors were enslaved, and you talking about whips and chains like American slaves, and then he's like, you rapping like you gonna free the slaves. Oh my God. Drake is so removed from his Blackness. That's so concerning. Not that this is a video about Drake and his Blackness. I remember like sitting up in my room, the diss tracks are like dropping on YouTube, and I remember there's the clip where Drake is like on the phone with his mom talking about, yeah, they said I can't say nigga no more. You talking about this with your white Jewish mama and you gonna put it on the track? You ain't never gonna get no hood credits for that, Aubrey. What? You think somebody care what your white mama got to say about hip hop beef and usage of the word nigga? Are you stupid? Lord. In regards to what I think the Super Bowl was about, I think this was Kendrick utilizing his platform to make it about the people that needed to understand what he was saying during the Super Bowl performance got it. Okay, the girls that get it. And I think that it was better for him to use his platform to carry on what he clearly has been doing since They Not Like Us and like the whole Drake beef started. Once again, like I said, the cleansing and the reclamation of hip hop, the purifying of the art form. It makes sense that he uses it on a stage like this, on a platform like this, and continues that legacy. But if you expected Kendrick to be your Martin Luther King or your Stokely Carmichael or your Malcolm X, you're like missing the point. And one of the things I will take away that people were saying on TikTok is that he's not going to be your savior. Kendrick himself said, in his song off Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, X, Y, and Z, so-and-so celebrities are not your savior. Like, you're gonna have to get up in the field, you're gonna have to organize, you're gonna have to be in your community, you're gonna have to do that work. But you should feel inspired. You should feel moved. I'm not gonna talk about how some of the like super left-leaning people were being very like annoying. They come across a little bit like pretentious, because I think that like art is supposed to inspire, and some art is revolutionary in and of itself. But I think the fact that this is even inspiring us to have a conversation, to talk about Uncle Sam, to talk about, you know, this image of like the breaking of the American flag, the red, white, and blue, and you got black men and like, you know, talk about Bloods and Crips, like all of that, I think is important. Art is supposed to make you think, right? And like I said before, somebody, hopefully all of us, are going to look at that performance and take something away from it that will change the world, change our community, change our country and our future for the better. Listo. Ahora quiero hablar sobre Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos by Bunny. Obviamente, este álbum es muy popular. Is that girl? I wanted to include Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos, a Bad Bunny's new album, because y'all know I speak a little Spanish. No hablo con fluidez todavía, pero yo entiendo muchísima y me encanta hacer en la parte de TikTok, donde la mayoría de la gente acá habla español. Entonces, I'm in Spanish speaking business, okay? We have broken the mold of Anglophile TikTok, which is nice. Obviously, like, good practice. I get to really like tap into what's going on with me, hermanos y hermanitas, in Latinoamérica. Entonces, Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos came out, girl, a few months ago, and to my knowledge, it has stayed on the Billboard chart, performed on SNL, Bad Bunny. Benito. Llámame. Anyway, just the SNL 50. He did a few like really big interviews. What really pushed Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos to be number one, it was number one for a little bit, and it still is, like I said, on the charts, and to really be the cultural moment that it is the commentary on gentrification in Latino America, and specifically in Puerto Rico, right? Which is where Bad Bunny is from. I don't know why I thought Bad Bunny was Puerto Rican and Dominican. Am I wrong about that? It was also really important because this entire album was a reclamation, which is literally the word of the hour, a reclamation of Puerto Rican culture, Puerto Rican dialect, of Caribbean-ness, being a Caribbean Spanish-speaking person. Even how he named the songs. You know, you have Verdad, which is like how a lot of Puerto Ricans and like Caribbean Spanish-speaking people say Verdad. Nueva York, Nueva York, right? It was just so Puerto Rican. Like, you could tell that he was trying to be intentional about his roots, and he wanted this body of work to say something. I feel like Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos is really similar to what Beyonce was doing in Cowboy Carter. Like, the flag that he is repping, the bandera, is literally the Puerto Rican rebel flag, or like it's not the official new flag that is supposed to be used, right? And so there is a sense of like rebellion and like pushing back against the powers that be that tried to define the future of Puerto Rico for Puerto Ricans, instead of giving Puerto Ricans the ability to discern for themselves what they will do with their island, with their culture, with their language. There is a greater conversation to be had about Puerto Rico either being given their sovereignty or given statehood. I am not as informed as I would like to be on the topic. So if I can find YouTube videos that are talking more about like what's been going on in Puerto Rico politically, I will link that down below. But one of the other classes I am taking is Intro to Latino Identity, which I'm really excited about. And I'm also taking Intermediate Spanish. We literally are having all these conversations in class and talking about the creation of like the caste system and what Spanish colonization looked like versus like Anglo colonization. And specifically, we just got to the chapters where we're talking about Spanish American War, which was essentially for Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines, and I'm missing a country. I'm missing islands. Forgive me. Something about this album feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like an unmasking. A lot of the Spanish in the album is like Puerto Rican slang, to the point where like a lot of other Latinos did not know what some of the words and like the slang he was using in the album meant. And like you can tell that like this is an album, this is a piece of art coming from somebody who's tired of like playing by the rules. There was a video that came out before the album, and it was this guy who is like in his local community in Puerto Rico. It looks like a panaderia, but I could be wrong. He's like trying to order something, and it's like all digital pay. He doesn't have the money for it. He's obviously like speaking in Spanish, and he's asking about like where the original owners were. He knew the owners of the business. And that video was really heartbreaking to watch as somebody who was from New York, who understands that gentrification is just modern day colonialism. It was really like heart-wrenching to watch that video and also to listen to certain songs on the album, specifically Lo que le pasó a Hawaii, which literally means essentially what happened in Hawaii, which I think was so beautiful to do because that was him creating like a link between what Puerto Ricans are experiencing and also what Hawaiians are experiencing, and really something that all indigenous people experience, which is displacement and gentrification. And I loved seeing even like Palestinians using that song on TikTok to talk about what's been going on in Palestine. Sometimes with certain places, specifically with like Hawaii and Puerto Rico, which are like tourist hubs, there's this false idea that like they're completely okay, that like tourism is like super beneficial for them and that you're doing them a favor by traveling to their country. And I feel like Bad Bunny was really intentional about shining a light on what Hawaiians have been yelling from the rooftops about, like, bro, stop coming here. Y'all messing up what we got going on. We need the time and the resources and the space to fix our stuff, and how tourism is hurting them. Like, he's sending out that landline, like, highlighting somebody else's struggle while also acknowledging that y'all have a shared struggle. That I just think was like really important to do. I do think, like I was saying before about tourism, as somebody that travels a lot, there is a conversation to be had about ethical tourism, especially to places in the Caribbean. Like I said before, I'm also Caribbean and I am literally studying Caribbean studies. So it's something that I'm really passionate about. And as somebody who loves to travel, I myself am trying to figure out how to navigate this in a way that the indigenous people of this land can still have the sovereignty and the control to be like, hey, yo, like, this is our stuff and y'all are guests. Act accordingly or access has been denied, right? Like, I would love to go to Hawaii, but I won't until the Hawaiians say that we could come there, And then this is my question about Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos and Bad Bunny and this residency that he's doing in Puerto Rico. So if you don't know, he announced a tour right after the release of the album. Well, residency is a better term, because similar to like what artists do in last oh my god, Dios mío, ahora quiero hablar español, similar to what they do in Las Vegas with certain artists. Like Adele did a residency there, Bruno Mars did a residency there. He will not be doing any shows outside of Puerto Rico. I also heard that some of the shows you can only get tickets for if you are a resident, un habitante de este Puerto Rico. I don't know another word, no sé otra palabra than like powerful feeling of like autonomy and sovereignty that I was talking about before. It's really like a big FU to the way that like the music industry works. And he's saying that like, if you're going to come enjoy our stuff, you're going to have to do it on our terms, that he's going to represent his people. He's staying home. And there's also been conversations about Bad Bunny no longer feeling pressure to speak English in his songs or in his interviews, because he's like, it's not my business, no me importa si la gente no entiende lo que yo hablo, right? You know what I mean? I love that. But Bad Bunny is still like a millionaire, ¿cierto? Like, he still has money, and like, he is way more rich than the average person in Puerto Rico working, right? And so what does this residency mean for them? What does this mean for the island? Tourism can be a tool to like increase the economy, right? And especially after like the hurricane. I really hated how bright my camera was looking, but now I feel like it looks too dark. Estoy locura, sí, okay. As someone who does want to go to Puerto Rico, I've never visited a Caribbean country, which is locura. Very crazy for me. Allah, please, I need to go to the Caribbean. I want to go to Puerto Rico for the show. Like, I would. But what does this mean for Puerto Ricans? Like, how do they feel back home in Puerto Rico? How do they feel about him announcing this tour and this residency? If you are Puerto Rican, I would love to know your thoughts about what the reception Debi Tirrar Mas Fotos has been in Puerto Rico, like not just necessarily like people of the diaspora, and how do y'all feel about this residency and all of these people coming to your home? I think about the conversations that Black people have had about Deti December and, going to Ghana and Lagos and all these places. Even though, like I said before, American as an identity was never something that I like fully embodied or felt like was mine. But when I started traveling, I was made aware of the privileges that I still had as somebody who is technically American, right? The money and the passport means a lot. And so, yes, Black people can travel to other places and act like colonizers and can replicate the same dangerous, harsh realities of American colonialism and imperialism 1,000%. And so it takes an active effort to remember that you are a guest in somebody else's space, but also you cannot discard of a people and their culture and their land. And like, a lot of the conversations about Debi December were people complaining about dirtying up like these venues, littering and like not wanting to tip and like X, Y, and Z, certain things that were just like really ruining the vibe, which is supposed to be about connecting back to your roots. So yeah, I really just have questions about what this tour, this residency means for Puerto Rico. Is it a means of boosting the economy? Because Renaissance did boost the American economy. Okay. In a way that was beneficial for a lot of people. But I just don't know what that would mean for, and this is, I don't mean in any offense, but just like certain places like Puerto Rico that I feel like post hurricane may not have the same infrastructure to hold like are these like a stadium tour? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm asking myself. And it would the tour, even if Bad Bunny has like good intentions, would this harm Puerto Rico in any way? Would it be more harmful than it is beneficial? No sé, tengo preguntas, tengo muchísimas preguntas. It's beautiful to see all of these artists trying to like, I think, take back control of the narrative. The reason why I wanted to call this video Art Under Capitalism is because there's something about when your art becomes your livelihood or like money gets involved in your art as an artist that can feel kind of like gross. Like it kind of muddies the waters because now some of your intentions have shifted and it's a lot for your art to be everything, to also sustain you, right? And there is an aspect of playing the game that all of us artists have to do to survive under capitalism. But the like essence of art is really like the antithesis of capitalism. And so I'm not somebody that's like separate the art from the artist. I think that's really stupid. An artist that wants you to do that is a bad artist. I don't mean like you shouldn't have distance from your art as an artist, 1,000%. Some of what you create, even if it's like, it's kind of, sometimes it's like, I guess it's like giving birth. Like it's a thing that you create, but it's not, it's of you, but it's not yours in a way. And people take from it what they will. But the idea that you can separate a person from something that they create, when creating something is such an intimate process, even for the mumble rappers, okay? And the people that like be rapping, you can tell they don't care. They're just here to get a bag. The process of creating a song, of creating an album is like work, Somebody is working hard to do something, even if it's not the performer themselves. Maybe it's the engineer. Maybe it's like the marketing team. It's the girls doing the TikTok dances to it. Them TikTok dances is hard. Somebody's working hard for something. And so, no, I don't think that you should separate the art from the artist. I think it's a better thing to say, I have a problematic faith, and you take whatever smoke comes from that. In my opinion, you can hold the two things to be true, that somebody is problematic and has done really harmful stuff, and that the art in and of itself is good. And you can feel both of those things and still say, I'm not going to support them further, but I love the memories and the nostalgia that I have connected with the art. You know what I mean? I think there's a different way to talk about it than just separate the art from the artist. And I said this in my Weird Lady Parts video. I do think that as artists, as people with a platform, you have a responsibility to talk, to speak up for those who don't have a voice. And I think that like your purpose and our purposes on earth, other than like, for God, is also about using the gifts that God gave you to better the world for all of us, for each other. I think the world will never be perfect. Like, this is dunya, right? But it doesn't have to be so unjust. There's a equilibrium somewhere that we can find. And I think artists can help move that process along. And I think, should they be the forefront of it? No, but I think they are an important piece. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I had a lot of fun talking about these different albums and these different moments in art and culture. These are really like my favorite things to talk about as a lover of media, as a lover of history, and as a lover of culture. I think it's really important to highlight the people that are, once again, shout out to Herbie Rivales, making smart art, that are making art that makes you think, and even art that moves you, even if you're upset, like being upset about Cowboy Carter. I think that it's important that art reminds us of our humanity and like our humanness and our human emotions, but also that like all of us do not have the same experiences or the same beliefs about what revolution mean, nor do all of us really have the same intentions. This has been just an interesting conversation to have. I like doing these like media wrap-ups. I did another one on paid members only, where I was talking about Wicked, Barbie, and Children of Blood and Bone. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me ever on the internet at Sincerely Tahiry. I also have a Substack now because your girl is a writer. Okay, Substack today, New York Times bestseller list tomorrow. So you can check that out down below, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Bye.